Two into Highchair for Smoking. Coming of Age in a 1990s Restaurant by Stephen Bernard. Copyright 2023. The characters and events portrayed in this book are fictitious. Any similarity to real persons, living or dead, is coincidental and not intended by the author. But yeah, you might be in it. No part of this book may be reproduced or stored in a retrieval system or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise, without express written permission of the publisher. This book is for all the people who appear within these pages. Although names and details have been changed, I'm sure they recognize themselves and are probably quite pissed at me. But I hope they enjoy the book. Chapter 1, Part 1, The Dish Pit. It was my last day at the restaurant, a busy Saturday. The lineup was 20 deep, and people were still coming up the stairs from the food court. An old couple and a family struggling with a stroller asked if we had elevator access. I said no. Whenever someone came up to pay, people craned their necks. "We've been waiting for ages. Why can't we get the table that just left?" "They were in the smoking section," I replied. "We're still waiting for someone to leave from non-smoking. 4 tables have their bill. We're just waiting for them to go." My answer didn't satisfy them. It never did. And then something inside me snapped. I finished taking down names, put down my pen, and walked away from the front counter without a word. I walked along the rail and looked out at the shopping mall below. Beyond the food court was a vast expanse, a seemingly endless expanse of small chain stores. Their neon logos glowed darkly. The lunch rush was at its peak. Servers took orders and brought out food. The boss's wife cleaned and set tables. Customers came and went. I went up a short set of stairs. This was the high ground. A row of booths with a couple of larger tables overlooking the rail. I passed them all and went up a second set of stairs. The kitchen pass bar was to my right. Soup cups, 6-inch plates, and a few other things were stored there. One of the servers was getting some salad from the cooler. Under the heat lamps, plates of food were beginning to pile up. From the kitchen, I could hear the boss boiling over. "Where's Amy? She's got 2 orders up." I made my way through the pass bar like a ghost, unseen, and walked into the back area, passing the kitchen and the dish pit before entering the men's changing room. I closed the door. My clip-on tie fell limply to my feet. The sexless green vest and white button-down shirt that I wore every shift, worn thin over the years, joined it in a heap. My belt dropped from my pants. The buckle made an audible clink on the tiled floor. The lockers seemed to stare at me. A faded football sticker from 1983 on one of them was the only decoration. I looked at myself in the mirror. The moment stretched out. No one saw me as I streaked past the kitchen, through the pass bar and down the stairs. If they had looked up, they would have noticed that I was naked. Completely stark naked. A high-pitched laugh escaped my throat as I turned to face the smoking section. A middle-aged man, a regular, was just about to light a cigarette when he saw me. His eyes widened. His jaw dropped. The cigarette, still unlit, slipped through his fingers. The fuck? The woman eating lunch with him turned around, saw me, and choked on a mouthful of Eggs Benedict. And then I was off. A screeching, gibbering mess. I ran toward the front, passing a family of 5 in a high chair seated at the gazebo. I could see the front counter, and beyond it, the stairs. Freedom. I was close. And then the boss came out of nowhere. He grabbed my arm. "Steve, what the hell are you doing? What?" He couldn't continue. His mind couldn't process what he was seeing. Everything seemed to stop. I quit. His grip loosened for a moment, and I pulled free. Free at last. God almighty, free at last. A final sprint to the front. The home stretch. The people waiting to be seated seemed to get excited as I approached. And then I was out. Down the stairs, across the mall, out the exit, and to my car. A suitcase in the trunk, passport, plane ticket, cash, and clothes. I would need clothes. But for now, I was dressed in freedom. After 6 years, 6 long years, I was finally free. There was no going back. Part 2. Okay, that's not how it ended, although I sometimes thought that it might. How did it start? Just before my senior year in high school, I saw an ad in the newspaper for a part-time dishwasher at the restaurant above the food court in the mall. It was not an upper level or second floor, more like a long balcony that looked over the food court and offered a view of the shops beyond it. It wasn't until later that I learned the term mezzanine. The only way that customers could enter the restaurant was by walking up a long staircase that started next to the food court and led up to the waiting area. As I walked up, I wondered how handicapped people got up there, or old people, families. What about strollers? There was no elevator, not even a ramp. I was there for a job interview, so I figured it was better not to ask. There were a couple of other guys waiting for an interview. The competition. One I recognized from school. Neither had bothered to tuck in their shirt. Good. Nothing to get worried about. I heard my name and looked up. There was the boss. He looked bigger than he was. Something about the way he carried himself gave off an air of authority and menace. I had worked in a restaurant before. Something about the managers of places like this. They seemed to attract a certain type. I got up from the seat in the waiting area and followed him up a short set of stairs to a booth. He asked me some questions about my last job. I liked it, but I didn't get home till really late. It interfered with school. That wasn't entirely true, but it sounded better than saying I had just gotten sick of the dish pit. And being a dish pig. But here I was, again. The things we do for money. The boss nodded. After a few more questions, he told me that my former boss had given me a good reference. The interview ended well, and he shook my hand. A few days later, I got the call. The job was mine. Part 3. I've got to get out of that shithole. I was in the food court after my first shift, a busy Saturday. I'd worked my ass off. The layout of the place was designed to maximize inconvenience. Right away, I noticed how spread out the restaurant was. The front pass bar, where the bus tubs were kept, was near the front of the restaurant. The dish pit was over the hills and far away, hidden in the bowels of the back. When the bus tubs were full of dirty dishes, taking them back, one by one, took forever. My best friend Sean sat across the table, eating a hamburger and listening to me recount the horror. "You don't think you'll stay there very long?" he asked. "No," I shook my head. I've really got to get out of that shithole. It was the end of summer, early September, 1992. Part 4. Life as a dish pig was not glamorous. Everyone wanted something at the same time. Cutlery, plates, a clean bathroom with toilet paper, full bus tubs changed. I was at the bottom of the totem pole. The dish pit was a place where dreams died. It was oppressively humid, and the smell of cleaning chemicals hung in the air. The brown tile floor, covered by a thick rubber mat, was always wet, a petri dish of bacteria and rodent excrement. The stainless steel counter was decorated with soggy bits of leftover food, and steam constantly poured out of the maw of the dishwasher. The garbage bin was an unspeakable mix of unfinished meals, disposable placemats, napkins, oil, and burnt grunge. Late one Sunday afternoon, I was finishing up after closing. The plates, cutlery, and kitchen equipment had been cleaned and put back, the counters wiped to a grimy shine, the black rubber mat rolled up and stored under the sink, and the floor broomed and mopped. Twice. Time for the garbage. Procedure was to put all the garbage bags into a shopping cart and take the delivery elevator to the ground level. Out the back door of the mall, tucked around the corner, was the trash compactor. Dump it and scram. I put the garbage bags from the pass bar and kitchen into the cart. One more to go, my own. I pulled it up out of the bin, tied it up, and took 2 steps toward the cart before it happened. The bag, overstuffed, split and shat the whole day's waste onto the floor. I looked at the mess, an island of filth. Somewhere, far away, I could hear elevator music. Peaceful. So peaceful. Outside of foxholes, despair rarely knew such depths. I was going to get out of this shithole. But not today. I got another garbage bag and began scooping up the slop. Part 5. On the floor, there was a core group of servers: Lori, Amy, and Fran. They were there when I started, and still there when I left. It wasn't easy to break into their ranks. A few did, but they came later. In the beginning, there was the big 3. Lori was Queen Bee. I knew it. She knew it. Everyone knew it. She had been there the longest and had her pick of shifts, which meant that she always got the best sections for tips. When we opened in the morning, the only sections open were along the rail. The front was non-smoking and the back was smoking. According to Lori, smokers generally tipped more, but they stayed longer. The best section was the front. In the morning, that meant tables 9 through 18. All non-smoking, all against the rail, overlooking the mall. Even when tables were open elsewhere, people would wait, sometimes for ages, for a table along the rail. It was like visiting the Grand Canyon for them. I couldn't understand the appeal. They came for the food, but they waited for the view. The front was where servers could expect to make the most tips. Amy was number 2, the trusted lieutenant. She could handle her section, but she couldn't command it the way Lori did. She normally worked in the back, the smoking section. If Lori had a morning off for college, then Amy usually took her place at the front. And then there was Fran. She was older than the rest of us and had a loud voice. Her eyes bulged, and she had an unsettling laugh. She was a stoner, and everyone knew it. Fran was married and had a young daughter. Every shift, we all got an earful about her home life. Fran loved music. She loved to sing, too. Not complete songs, though. Instead, she sang whatever lyric popped into her head at any given moment. Her voice carried. Really carried. When a table annoyed her, she would stomp into one of the pass bars and start complaining to the other servers, who always told her to keep her voice down. She had a particular dislike of Asian customers and liked to make fun of their accents when they couldn't hear her. And then she would frown and hiss, "They never tip." If she had something to tell the line cooks about an order, she would open her mouth long before she reached the kitchen. As soon as she passed the staff room, she would start barking, and half of what she had to say would be out before her oversized eyes appeared under the heat lamps. As a dishwasher, Floor politics didn't mean much to me. All I knew was when the bus tubs were full and Lori told me to change them, the tone in her voice left no ambiguity that this task now assumed number one on my list of things to do. Amy was easier to talk to. She didn't normally get stressed out either. Fran, though, was a wild card. She had been serving tables since she was a teenager. She had a bitterness towards the job and customers that I guess was understandable. Do any job long enough and you'll come to hate it. Or the people. Norma was a long-termer too, one of the few to later join the ranks of the big three on the floor. She had grown up in Mexico, but immigrated to Canada to marry her boyfriend. She had hoped to find good employment, but wound up as an underpaid and overworked secretary. She despised her boss. I wouldn't piss on that bastard if he was on fire. Norma worked part-time at the restaurant. She liked to come to work early, smoke a few cigarettes, have a meal, and chat with whoever was around. For her, the restaurant wasn't just a job. It was a social thing. Customers sometimes remarked the restaurant had remarkably little turnover. Year after year, the same faces stayed on. Whatever else could be said about the place, it kept us there. Not everyone, though. A fair share came and went quickly. I can't remember all the names. For example, there was an older waitress with short blonde hair that worked with us for a while. She had decades of experience and could hold plates all up and down her arms. They were so thin, like spaghetti noodles. I had no idea how they supported the weight. She was a master at her craft and could pull off a great shift without breaking a sweat. What was her name? Pam? Let's call her Pam. Was quite wrinkled. Her skin somewhat leathery. She didn't just smoke. She loved to smoke. She was also incredibly upbeat. All life's problems, she believed, could be solved with the right attitude. Then you're laughing. She would look at the cigarette between her fingers. And then you have a smoke. You win. Every time she laughed, it would come out as half a cough, and she would clear her throat of phlegm as she did so. Let's call her Pam eventually found a job elsewhere and moved on. She was missed. Some were short-timers, others long, but most were on their way to something else, a career outside of restaurants. A few went to college, gradually chipping away at a degree. And then there were the lifers. They might quit, but they'd never get out. They might have kids or something, but they'd be back. They always came back. Some people were destined to spend their lives on the floor, whether they liked it or not. And that was Fran, to a T. Part 6. It's harvest time! I turned in the direction of the voice. It was Mark. He was still in high school, like me, but worked in the kitchen, a head up on the totem pole. Mark had an odd sense of humor. I liked him. He held a canister of air freshener, the kind we used in the bathrooms, in one hand. It was different from the other brands. It didn't have a sweet, candy-like scent, like most of them. It didn't smell like flowers either, or anything else that might cover the smell left by someone too ill-mannered to flush the toilet. No, Harvest Time had a unique bouquet, its own eau de toilette. The canister depicted a lush pastoral landscape of rolling hills dotted with a farmhouse and maybe a cow or two. Yeah, remember to leave the door open when you're done. Our changing room was a tiny, claustrophobic area, somehow fitting a dozen narrow, stacked lockers, a small washing basin, and a toilet stall of unbelievably cramped proportions. It was within these confines that we would sit down after a long shift and take a dump. One day, Mark noticed that the air fresheners were stored in one of the lockers. He did the right thing. I didn't even need to walk into the changing room. The smell of harvest time made its presence known. You'll never complain about the changing room smelling like crap again, and you'll never worry about stinking it up for someone else. Mark was proud of his discovery. He was right, of course. The pocket-sized changing rooms had no ventilation. There was nowhere for the smell to go. Harvest time covered the stink like a balaclava on a terrorist. Now, the threat was still there, but it was masked. Perhaps that's not the best analogy. Regardless, Mark had a right to be proud. It was an improvement. Part 7. The weekend brought all types to the mall. Young people with little money but a lot of time. Old people with little time but a lot of money. Families of all shapes and sizes. Some came to shop, others to watch. But they all came. Every weekend. Buy and feed. Feed and buy. In the end, they were the same impulse. Consume. We could look down on them, literally and figuratively, from our mezzanine perch. The stores on each level were staffed with the very young or very old, those who either hoped to get out or hoped to be kept on. For some, it was a stepping stone. For others, just a stone. They didn't have much else to grab onto. Walking around the mall all day, with purpose or without, left both young and old with the same problem. Hunger. An army marches on its stomach. By accident or design, all halls in the mall, every escalator, every corner, led to the food court. The bottleneck of shoe stores, casual apparel retail, jewelers, boutiques, tobacconists, music shops, sports outlets, and countless other dispensaries of minimum wage paying death led to a clearing, like a narrow valley opening up to a grand swath of pasture. Empty stomachs brought them to the food court, and there we were, just above it. For those willing to take the hike upstairs, better, tastier options awaited. Or so they hoped. Hope had a different meaning in the dish pit. For me, hope meant the lunch rush wouldn't come all at once, that it would be busy enough to make time pass quickly, but not a chaotic frenzy. A nice medium. This particular Saturday, it was busy. The other dish pig had called in sick, and there was no one else. I was slammed. "Stephen, all the tubs in the back pass bar are filled. Can you please change them now?" It was Lori. She stood at the entrance to the dish pit, hands on her hips. Be right there." I sprayed the congealed remnants of hash browns and egg yolk from a plate. They didn't come off easily. I wiped them off with my hand, gave the plate a quick once-over with a scrubber pad, one last blast with the dishwasher hose, and then loaded it on the dish rack. Not a spare inch of space was left. It was textbook perfect. "Now, Stephen. I'm just going to drop these plates off in the kitchen and I'll be right down." Lori left. Everyone wanted something at the same time at moments like these. I took down several stacks of washed dishes from the shelf. Platter plates, dinner plates, 7-inch plates, salad bowls. I stacked them, gingerly picked up the swaying tower of dishes, and tested my footing on the wet rubber mat. The boss was yelling out orders like a drill sergeant. Under the heat lamps, plates of food were piling up. Below the counter, orders were posted in a horizontal line. The printer chirped merrily as new orders came in. As each one finished, the boss tore the paper off the printer and pinned the order up. The cooks were too busy to notice me. "Coming through," I called out. The tower in my arms began to lean at a dangerous angle. Shit, no time to waste. I reached safety and put them down on the sandwich board. Unloading time. Salad bowls first, right side, far from the heat lamps. 7-inch plates, perpendicular to the sandwich board. Half finished. The dinner plates and platter plates went underneath the counter. I separated them into 2 stacks. Time to go. As I turned away, I half noticed one of the orders come loose. It hadn't been pinned up securely, and now I watched it fall between the stacks of plates. I contemplated mentioning it, but for some reason, I didn't. I just assumed it would be fine. They would see it, surely. I left and went down to the back pass bar. It felt good to be out of the heat. The kitchen was like a pressure cooker. Amy was near the fridge, making a milkshake. On the other side of the pass bar was a long table with 3 bus tubs, all filled to overflowing. "It's good you're here," she said, over the noise of the milkshake machine. "A bunch of tables have their bill. We need these tubs emptied right away." As if on cue, a table stood up. It was a family with a young son and a baby daughter. The father put out his cigarette in the ashtray and picked up the bill, while his wife tried to wrestle the daughter out of a highchair. The boy played a pocket video game. I picked up a bus tub, brought it back to the dish pit, and then made a return trip. For good measure, I went to the front pass bar. 3 full bus tubs on the counter greeted me. At the front of the restaurant, I could see a crowd of people milling around, waiting to be seated. The hostess didn't seem to be enjoying her job. Back to the dish pit, down to work. Unload, dump, spray, load, sort, rinse, repeat. Time passed. From far away, I became aware of yelling. The kitchen. The boss wasn't reading out the latest order. He was screaming at one of the cooks. Something had been lost. A waitress was freaking out. Where was the food? No one knew. Where was the order? It couldn't be found. The arguments escalated. I couldn't make out the words. The well-oiled machine in the kitchen had malfunctioned, and pieces were starting to fly. "You can stick this job up your ass!" These were the first words I heard clearly. The cook stormed past the dish pit. I couldn't remember his name. He hadn't been with us for very long. His face was flushed, and he looked ready to cry. He went into the changing room and slammed the door. This is because of me, I thought, with growing guilt and horror. This is all me. The cook came out with his jacket and backpack. His apron and shirt were in a heap on the floor. "You stupid son of a bitch!" the boss yelled. And the cook was gone. Man down, man down. No time to argue. The waitress came back with an update. The customers had left after making a scene. It felt like war. There was nothing to do but keep going. Shoot, reload the guns, and press forward. The kitchen moved on and finished the orders. I washed the dishes, brought out plates and cutlery, brought back more bus tubs, and filled the racks. Rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat. Finally, the orders slowed from a torrent to a trickle. The last dishes were carried out, and the customers started eating. The bus tubs would remain empty until the last wave got their bills. I went down to the back pass bar and asked Amy to put in my lunch order, a chicken strip burger with fries. Passing by the boss's office, I saw him in his chair in front of the computer. His head was in his hands. He pushed the door closed with one arm. I went to the changing room. Stepping over the shirt and apron on the floor, I noticed something else. The cook had left his golf cap, a jaunty-colored thing that he had worn every shift. It had been his trademark. It's all my fault. I never mentioned it to anyone. Part 8. The cook that quit that day wasn't the only one whose name I can't remember. For a while, the kitchen was a revolving door of short-timers. Few stood out. Max did, though. He was older, had lines on his face, and long, thin hair that he kept tied up under a hairnet. After work in the staff room, he would let it down, light a smoke, and relax. He made me think of an aging rock star. Whenever he saw me, he would smile and say, "Steve, man!" Max told me that he used to be a performer, some kind of dancer. At one point, he had done Alice Cooper impressions in clubs downtown. I could see the resemblance. He didn't talk about his past much, but everyone knew he was a recovering alcoholic, possibly with other issues. He was an experienced line cook and liked to take charge in the kitchen. The other liners didn't like him, though. They said he ordered them around and got pissed off easily. He got into arguments with servers and the boss, too. I didn't see much of this from the dish pit. Sometimes I heard yelling, but that seemed normal. All right, 2 gourmet burgers, 1 no fries, no mayo, a chef salad, and 2 orders of chicken strips. I also need a clubhouse on brown with fries, a BLTC on white, and 1 fish and chips. In the staff room, Max was different. He was easygoing, even philosophical. He seemed happy to have someone listen to him. I was still in high school, but felt a little bit sorry for him. He was twice my age and still getting by working in the restaurant industry. Over the years, I met a few guys like that, and I always wondered if they loved cooking, or was it just that they couldn't do anything else? They were older, had been around, but here they were. My respect for them was always diluted with the assumption that they must have screwed up somewhere down the line. Who embarks on adulthood with flipping burgers as their goal for a career high water mark? Over time, the tension between Max and the boss reached a boiling point. One busy Saturday, Amy came into the kitchen pass bar, peered through the space under the heat lamps into the kitchen, and started to inquire about her order. The boss cut her off, barking, "Don't worry, we've got it all under control. I'm in here, not Max." I heard on the floor that Max had some personal problems. His roommate, also a recovering alcoholic, had started drinking again. Max wasn't happy about it, understandably. It seemed he brought a lot of stress with him to work. And then, one day, he was gone.